Thank you for once again for listening to the Blueprint to Ultra podcast with me, Steve Epifano, and Jeff Winchester. We've appreciated all the feedback we've received, and personally, I love all the new connections that we're making in this amazing ultra running community. You may recognize our next guest as the crew chief extraordinaire. He was the crew chief during Paul Johnson's transcontinental run and Matt Johnson's transtexas run in 2024. He provided us insight and levity with his crew chief updates, basically on the daily. And I know that I tuned in repeatedly to how things were going. You may not know that he is an accomplished ultra runner in his own right. He currently holds the world record for 100 miles in Antarctica. You heard that right, Antarctica. He also has completed the Bigfoot 200 and multiple FKTs. He's a Navy veteran, and I think he has been more places in the U.S. than I have been in my entire life. I know that he will have many insights on creating a team around you to help you achieve your goals that will have you put on your Blueprint to Ultra. With that, welcome Rob Sembiente to the show. We're stoked to have you with us tonight, man.
I appreciate you folks. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Rob, we talked a little bit before the show. Super excited to kind of actually record with you, to have this episode with you. I mentioned I've kind of known you for about a year, and you and I have never actually talked. We may have liked a post here or there along the way, but other than that, we've never really met. And so just from backstory, just for those who may not know some of this, typically we will go into an episode like this. We'll say, tell us about your running background. How did you get started running? We don't really want to start there with you. Instead, we kind of want to bridge some of what we think the ultra running community does in building relationships and the networking side of things. And so back in 2023, I was co-hosting a podcast with my friend Jeremy Reynolds. It was called the Ultra Running Guys Show. We've been doing that for 4 years. That show came to an end. Steve and I launched our own show, which is called Blueprint to Ultra, which is what you're on today. But during that time in 2023, we actually recorded with Paul Johnson. And he was at that point talking about his plans to run transcontinental. And he had put together a crew. He had an entire plan to kind of support the RWB Foundation. And all of his, I guess, focus was running across the country. And so we spent a lot of time with the episode doing that. Well, fast forward a little bit, and we got closer to his target time of launching this run. And it was February 14th, Valentine's Day. I got a missed call from him through social media, through Instagram. He didn't have my phone number at the time. And I missed it because I was working, and I ended up just messaging him back my phone number. He called me back on the 15th of Feb. And at that point, he told me that his crew chief at that time, that somebody who had planned on being his crew captain, had fallen through. There was something that had gone amiss or awry with that plan. And so he said, do you happen to know anybody who could be my crew while I go across the country? Now, that's a huge undertaking because it's not like something you do for a weekend, right? And I told him, no, I don't have a clue. Like, I have no idea. I said, however, one of the things I love about ultra running is that we have a very tight group of people and a very connected community. So why don't I just put the message out to a few people that I know and see if they can help network as well? And so one of the people I contacted was Steve, who has been connected to the Ultra Running Guys podcast the entire time. And I said, Steve, do you know anybody? Because Paul is saying he needs a crew and I'm not sure how to help him out. Do you have somebody? And so Steve, you can take over from what happened next.
Yeah, at first I was kind of jealous that I wasn't able to do it because I had just quit my job. So it would have been perfect. But I think with 2 kids and trying to get the coaching business up and running, I wasn't able to do it. I had thought of a couple people right away. Hector was one of them, and he was down there with you guys. So I was on my way to Jackpot Ultra in 2024. While I was on my way there, Jeff talked to me, and I was like, I'll reach out to a couple people. Then when I got there, happened to be set up right next to Rob and Ben Light. And you guys were crewing 3 people from 3 women, which is from the UK, which was crazy in itself that you were there with people from the UK that came all the way over to do that. And I think Hector had stopped over to talk to Ben and you. And so I went over to talk to Hector. I was like, he usually jumps into crazy stuff like that. So I asked him and he said he couldn't do it. And what I love about the ultra running community is just this, where you were right next to him and you were like, it's Paul Johnson, right? I was like, yeah, it's Paul. And you're like, I've heard of him. He's a Navy vet. I was like, yep. And you're like, yeah, I can do it. Put me in touch with him. And I was like, that's nuts. Like, I knew you for like 2 seconds at the race. And, we got to know each other over the 24 hours that I was there. And there you are, like a month later, going across Transcon with Paul. Like that's amazing. You're like, we didn't know anybody. And then it was just like, yeah, I'll do it. Why not? I got nothing going on.
Yeah,
Yes.
it is a wildly small community too, that was able to happen in such a quick, like the time from you telling me Paul has problems with this crew to me being on a RV was less than 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was fast.
That's nuts.
Yeah, because when Steve gave me your, the way he gave me your information, he gave me your Instagram account. And so I actually sent that message. I forwarded your account to Paul. I said, hey, Paul, reach out to this guy. Sounds like he can do this. You may want to see if it can happen. And so last I heard, you guys connected. It's just stupid. Like if you, in the big picture, it's stupid to think about the fact that you were able to do this and that you jumped on this crew and you stayed with him the entire time.
Yeah.
Yeah. From start to finish, like start of op, picking up the RV, getting to the Airbnb, prepping for the start, finish, post op, like 57 days.
That's crazy. I'm taking full credit for it, by the way, too.
I give credit to both of you.
I take all the
did
credit.
no work.
My
did
whole
no work.
year this year has pretty much been made by you two.
You're welcome.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's amazing.
You must be single. Because if you were married, your
Yes.
wife would kill us or you.
Yeah. Relationships don't really last too well when you go on 2-month trips.
All right.
No, that's weird.
So let's start there. You are the crew chief extraordinaire. You gave your daily crew chief updates. It was something that a lot of people followed along with Paul, but also with Matt when you did his transtexas journey as well. So this is what you have become known for. So let's stay there a little bit. What do you think makes a good crew chief?
For something that is of that nature, of a multi-day like stage race, essentially, is treating every day like day one. One thing I learned while I was in the military and doing other various ops is that when you get complacent and think that you know things or things are going well, or if you just have something nice happen to you, that's usually when everything just goes to shit, for lack of a better term. For example, we get offered a house on one of these nights and we're able to drive there and there's going to be beds for us and heating and water and all of that. But then the next day, everyone's so happy. We forgot to do things for the prep of the next day. There's no breakfast ready. People are waking up late. We're not starting at the right time. And now the day is completely screwed. So treating every day like it's day one. And then also for something that's so long, the more you think of the end, the longer it gets. For me, at that point, when you get something that's that long, or for all of my running events, nothing else exists. It is day one, every single day. It's never going to end. I'm never getting out of it. This is just how my life is. So when I'm able to put myself in that perspective of what I call like, I'm at day one every single day, that will keep you operating as a crew or as a runner or anything in general in between to be able to optimize your performance.
I like that. It also terrifies me.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because a lot of people want to have the end in sight, because if you feel like it's going to last forever, how do you stay motivated or how do you stay in the game to say, I need to relook at today as day one, even though, like, does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes. But when you're doing something that's that long, or let's just say somebody who, Steve, you're running Copidona, when you have those, things are going so well, I'm so motivated, you're also going to have the inverse effect of life sucks. I'm so far down into this canyon of a cave, of a pain cave, and nothing is going to be able to make it better. If you just have that feeling of this is it, there's no positive, which also means that there's no negative, and this is just how my life is. The van's going to break. I know that was going to happen. The RV is going to break. I know that was going to happen. Paul's ankle was going to break. I know that was going to happen. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. A good day doesn't matter. A bad day doesn't matter. You keep on doing the same thing every day to optimize performance and keep on moving forward.
So how do you get your crew, or even your runner, in this case, Paul or Matt or somebody, how do you get them to buy into that same mindset? Or do you ignore that?
They can do whatever they like. Morale for a crew, especially on a multi-day event, is based off of two main parts. One is going to be your runner, and the next one is going to be whoever's leading the crew, because the runner's not with the crew for a long period of time. So the morale is based largely off of the leader. And then if the runner comes in a bad mood, the crew is going to also reflect that bad mood as well. For me, I wake up every day, the exact time we're supposed to wake up. I'm making sure that we're doing the exact things that we're supposed to do. Nothing's changing. I'm reminding people to do something. When people are in a bad mood and are moving slowly, I don't give a shit. Like, I don't care. We need to move the same way that we moved yesterday and the day before and the day before and the day before. That's how we're going to keep on moving forward. So it does put you in a precarious situation, especially when there are times where no one will like you as a crew chief. So Paul injured or he's like hating life and you're pushing the crew to keep on moving and your runner's being an asshole, which is making the crew upset with him and not want to do anything. And then you're pushing both of them past the envelope of where they want to go. So like no one likes you at all.
Yeah.
And it sucks because you're out there, like you're essentially by yourself at that point. So it's an interesting task to have, but to keep everyone motivated is just keeping the same routine every day and making sure that you're leading by examples and making the right decisions.
Yeah. And then that's something that you have to have, because if you don't, then it's just going to be everybody's doing whatever they want, really. So you need somebody with, while you're still looking at that day one mentality, that you still kind of have that end in sight to where if we don't do these things as if they were day one, we're never going to get to that end.
Especially with something that's at long.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like, think about it. Oh, wow, we're at day 45. Dude, there's literally another like 400 miles left. It's longer than like any ultra that's put on right now.
Yeah. And was that a conversation that you had with everybody beforehand? Or was that like something you had to discuss with people? Or did you repeat it over and over again? Like, did you come in with that, like have a crew meeting before, say, this is how we're going to handle things? Or was that something that you learned along the way with like, okay, it's day 5 and it's going to hell. So we need people. This is how we need people to be.
What I tell everyone before I'm going to do a long crewing effort, if I'm in charge, is that, hey guys, the first 48 to 96 hours, you're going to mess everything up. There's probably nothing that you're going to do right. And it's going to get to you every single time that it happens. You're going to get upset. You're going to get in your own head. And that's going to reflect on team morale. It does not matter. Everything will get messed up. What matters is us problem solving and fixing the issues. It doesn't matter if you mess it up. It matters that we fix it as a team so we don't then mess it up afterwards. People always have this idea of, oh, I need to get an assigned job or I need to have an assigned this. It's like, we're going to operate as a team. I will tell you where to go. You will go there. And if you mess something up, we'll fix it and we'll keep on moving forward. If you're able to keep that mentality of, I'm going to mess up, it's okay. We problem solve and keep on moving forward. Even for people that are new to the sport in general, we had a few people that had never crewed ultras before on that crew. They're able to understand and comprehend what's going on.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fascinated by this, to be honest with you. And I guess the reason I am is we set the stage. We said you didn't know each other. Like you just didn't know Paul. It wasn't like you were friends. It's not like your family members. And it sounds like you probably didn't know all the other crew members either. And they don't really know each other. So a lot of people that go into something like this are going to think to themselves, they've got to get connected family members. They got to get close friends. They've got to have somebody that they've got a vested trust in. Like you don't literally trust one another because you don't have enough of a relationship. You're almost dedicating your time 100% to sacrifice. Paul is sacrificing his own personal boundaries as well. And everybody else that's part of this crew is sacrificing personal boundaries to willingly submit to one another, if you will, to go through this exercise, which if you piss somebody off too much could leave at any moment.
Yeah,
that is true.
Like it's fascinating to me that there's this interplay of personalities that somehow machine operated because you don't have so much emotional timber or closeness in the beginning. Now, I'm not saying after a few days or even weeks and stuff that I'm sure the bonds for everybody got a lot tighter. For those who were there for more time, for the most of the time, like I know you were there the entire time, and as was Paul, obviously, but other crew members, from what I understand, were coming and going. A good number of them were.
Yes, they were. Just a tidbit to round back to what you were saying before in regards to family members and significant others. If this is just personal preference, sure. I've talked with also the gentleman that ran across Canada and a few other people that have done transcontinental runs. Having a significant other or a family member that is not extraordinarily experienced in crewing you and you specifically, do not bring them on the event. both events that I've been on that were extraordinary, actually 3 events I've been on that are extraordinarily long with people that are not very well versed in the crewing aspect of their runner. It just causes so many more problems than benefit. So I would first of all recommend not to. And then your question that you just had on people coming in and out.
Mm-hmm.
We had Paul's mom, Janice, was there the whole time. And then I was there the whole time. We had 2 crew members for less than a week, and then they did not return. And then we had 2 cameramen come in and out a couple times, and then another crew member come in and out a couple times. So the minimum that we had was 2, was me and Paul for a little bit. And then the maximum we had was 6, Paul and 5 crew members.
That's a lot.
Incredible. Yeah.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of turnover.
Yeah, turnover. It's a lot of
turnover.
A lot of turnover, a lot of dealing with dynamics and like patience, man. My patience would be challenged a lot. And you've got to, and I mean, you've got to be able to forgive quick. You know what I mean? Like you got to be able to day one, everything, not just how you start off all your routines. Every single one is day one, but to mentally reset your mind that this is a new day and we're beginning again every time. And so it makes sense a lot with this rule of day one that you talked about. So for yourself, did you become a better leader?
I believe I got a lot more practice in personality management. So being able to diffuse problems as that they were arising, and then also being able to mitigate flare-ups just between certain crew members and others. And then just also knowing that some people take on the advice that I say as day one and, you know, being a beginner and you're going to mess up everything, and some people don't. So I learned a lot of that. Yeah. That's for sure.
I mean, it probably goes back to military training that you had too. It's not like you're waking up at 9 o'clock and then going to do a 9 to 5. Like everybody is operating on minimal sleep. Everybody's sleep deprived. So that managing personalities is hard anyway, but then managing it with all that stress on top of it is incredibly difficult.
Especially at the beginning. The beginning when we were on, like we were trying to hold record pace before everyone got mad at us. We were like, it was of running op time. It was 19 hours a day. And there's like a 1 hour wind up and wind down. So like crew was getting 3 hours of sleep and Paul was getting less. So the sleep deprivation was definitely, it was I figured it out by the end of the second week of what the operation needs to be. But for a 19-hour running time, it's very, very strenuous on the crew.
And if people aren't used to that, like I know when I brought my documentary crew to my last Cocodona, my wife had been used to sleep deprivation, but the second day they were out, they were all loopy. And my wife was like, you guys got to get it together. Like, this is how we do it. And so I'm sure you had to do the same thing. Like, we got to get our stuff in order. Like, this is how we operate. Wake up.
It's true. There's also the adverse or the inverse of that is everyone wants to be there. Macho crew member. We're all going to be there for Paul, right?
Yeah.
But if you have 4 people, you need to be tactical with who's sleeping and who's awake, but everyone wants to help in the beginning, especially at the beginning. So no one's sleeping. You should have we only really need 1 person driving, 1 person crewing, Paul running, right? That's realistically all that needs to be awake. Everyone else could be sleeping. So getting people to sleep was, and always will be very difficult, especially in the shorter events. Like it always is. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
Well, why this does not sound like the most exciting thing you could have done with your time. Let's just be honest. Like it sounded like it was very difficult, but here's really why I say it that way. Why did you say yes? And every day, why did you continue to say, yes, I want to be here?
Well, I know from my own personal time and ultras and what I've done in the past that having something planned to a small scale, like let's just say Moab 240, That's small scale compared to a 3,000 mile run. And just for your crew not to be able to be there, and like, that's going to completely screw you. So I put myself in that position. Like, I would want to help somebody out. I've always tried to help people out. That's one of my things that I try to pride myself on, is that like, I try to be a good dude. What we used to call in the Navy when I used to work on the teams, it was like, be a good dude, do the right thing, never miss twice. That's what I tell myself every day. And just be a good dude. That would suck. I would hate my life if I was in Paul's scenario and I was not able to run this because somebody else wasn't able. Like, that's a horrible situation. And I know that finding somebody for a 50-day trip is going to be horrific. And then also, okay, I'll try to find people for a week at a time. Now you got to logistically coordinate 5 different groups of people, plus the cost of like in and out with flights. It's insane. So, I mean, every single day, why do I keep on moving forward? When I say I'm going to help somebody out, I'm not going to ditch them. We got to be a good dude.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's literally incredible. You're like, the ultra running gods put you in the right spot for this connection to be made. Like, there's no other explanation. Like, it's just an incredible pairing that took place. And the fact that you were able to say yes every day, because I know it was hard. You even touched on the fact that, a lot of people got frustrated when the world record attempt started going to the wayside. Like, there was a lot of drama that was thrown at y'all that is not, we're not going to go into it. It's not the place for that. There's just crap. Like, they just came out, and it's unhealthy for a lot of the things that were taking place. And the fact that y'all continued on is super impressive. Now, I have one more question as a crew chief, though, that I have to ask. And the reason I have to ask it is because there's a good friend of mine who insisted that I ask this question. And Steve, you're well aware of who she is as well. But she wants to know, how do you motivate someone when they want to quit and convince them to eat?
Well, convincing them to eat is obviously, if you eat, you're going to get more motivated. That's usually how life goes. That's how my coach told me. That's how I tell everybody else. But I do it as a process. It's going to sound pretty boring, but you can't eat. All right, try give them salt. If they're not taking the salt in, that means that they're over salted. Give them some water, wait for the appetite to come back, or just give them food that doesn't have any salt in it. It's like Spring Energies. Those always work well, or applesauces. If that doesn't work, then give them a nap.
Yeah.
And then when they wake up from the nap, make sure they have enough nutrition before they go to bed. Put them to sleep, wake up, see what happens. That's how I would, if I'm looking like at a textbook version in regards to like pushing somebody further just by speaking to them. Yeah, depending on how long you've been crewing the runner for, you can kind of figure out what makes them tick. I knew a certain few buttons I could press with Paul that would make him kind of just become an asshole and start running fast. Sometimes that worked, sometimes that didn't. Other than that, it's like at one time with my crew, like I didn't want to go any further, and they just threw my pack out the door with my pacer and then just drove away. Like, you can't, you literally, like, there's no service. There's nothing else you could do. Like, you have to go to the next spot.
You got to go.
Like the last one. So we talk about this, Steve, with some other guests too. It's the idea of that low mood, eat food, that kind of thing. But you actually said something that got my attention that I've never actually kind of nuanced. And you said that you start with salt and everything too. Because we typically look at people who hit the wall either because of food or because of low electrolytes, right? Or hydration. And so, and the mind often says, you got to make sure they eat. But you're right. You should probably start to making sure that their salt intake and electrolytes are in a right spot first. And then you can move to food, because if they don't want to eat, you got to at least get them to drink and go ahead and start getting their salt balanced out. And so that's a really good strategy to kind of systematically move them through that process. If you can't get them to eat, then you can at least get them to drink and start making sure their electrolytes are balanced out. So anything else, Steve, that you have about crewing from our crew chief extraordinaire?
No, I think that was great. And I think, like you said, that speaks to how the ultra running community is. Just being able to hop into it is amazing.
So as Steve mentioned in the introduction to, we know that you also run. You're not just everybody's crew chief. You're not just sitting around waiting for somebody else to listen to this podcast and say, I'm going to reach out to Rob and ask him to crew me across the country. You're not waiting on that. I don't think you are.
So I've gotten a few more offers since then. And I literally 2 days ago, I just told someone no, like, great guy. I've seen him operate. I wouldn't do it. It's just like, yeah.
Just leave it at that. You're allowed to say no.
Yeah, you know what to say. Yeah.
But my
Just
point
no.
is, you are also an accomplished ultra runner. You have done some pretty tough stuff as well. We want to talk about your first 100-mile race that you completed. And we may touch on the one that you even mentioned, I think, yesterday on your Instagram as well. But we're going to start with the Bigfoot 200 in 2023. This was your first race that you completed that was greater than 100 miles. And you mentioned in your email that you learned during this race how to be truly present in your experience, no matter any circumstances. And I guess what we'd like to know first is, what do you mean by being truly present in any experience?
This is going to sound quite morbid. Just going to put that out there at first. I showed up to Bigfoot. I lived in Virginia Beach for like 3 years. And then I moved to Florida, and my last 2 months of my training block were in Florida. So there's no vert, right? I had not trained a single downhill. My training blocks throughout the week were like Monday, Wednesday, Friday would be 8 miles at 15% incline on a treadmill. Like, it was just boring and miserable. Right. So I started Bigfoot, and things were going well until obviously they weren't, and running downhill became impossible. And I realized it was going to be a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. And this is where I really nailed in the concept of like day one mentality, of just like making sure that nothing else exists. I put myself into a headspace that I was at war with this race, and that there was nothing else that existed in my life for now and forever. So meaning like there was no end to the race ever, that like I was never going to be able to sleep again, that I have no family, I have no friends, I have no past, I have no future. There's literally nothing in my world that exists other than just running forward or limping forward in the middle of a forest. And I was in that mentality from about mile 70 or so until I picked up my girlfriend at the time. I picked her up at mile 150 something. And like, she was like, "Oh, like, what do you think?" I was like, there's no end. Like I like was fully like, at that point, it's been like 2 days of me thinking like this, like there's literally nothing in my life after this. So that's what I mean by being fully present, is that like nothing else mattered, nothing else existed, like didn't care about, like full on, like I woke up, like there was nothing. Yeah. Pretty messed up.
And I know I don't think it's morbid at all, really. Maybe the point where like it's never going to end, because a lot of people in the back of their mind, think that eventually, if I keep moving forward, it will end. So maybe that's the only part that's like that. But I do agree with you that, and I like that you said that you were at war with a race and not with like anybody else that was out there. Like you weren't racing anybody else. You were running against the race and the course, and that's kind of my mentality and how I approach those things. But with the end in sight, like I don't think that it's going to take forever. I just know that the step that I take today and the step that I take like in this minute is the only thing that matters. There really isn't anything else that's going on. That's what I like about running like that and trail running, that it is fully present, because you can't check out like you can on the road, because there's trail running. You got to pay attention to every step you take, which really is great, because that really puts you in the mindset that the next step matters, and you just do that repeatedly.
100%.
Yeah. So, because a lot of runners are going to look at something and they're going to say that they will keep moving forward because at some point they know it's going to come to an end. But you have this skill set. I'm going to call it a skill set. You call it morbid. You have a skill set where you completely disassociate, right, from the experience, from the reality of everything outside of that race, if you will. It's not like you're disassociated from just breathing. Like you're just disassociated from everything else around you. So is that something you've always done, or is that something that you learned about yourself that you needed to apply in this moment?
I applied it in that moment. If I were to think of, yes, this is probably where I got it from. So I joined the Navy when I was 18, and I went to this training called BUDS. That's basic underwater demolition SEAL training. And I was a young buck, and I became a boat crew leader. And we were running with boats on heads. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before. For the people that don't, you essentially have a boat crew of 7 people. You put a 300-pound boat on your head and you run as fast as you can, faster than all the other boat crews, or else your life sucks and you essentially get the piss beat out of you by a bunch of trained killers.
Mm.
So I was 19. I had no idea how to be a leader. And I wound up having 3 people quit underneath my boat. And it was 4 of us running with this 300-pound boat on our head. And I wound up thinking like, my girlfriend, why don't I just like have a normal life? Like, why don't I just like, we can get married? And like, this is like ridiculous. And I have friends and I have family. Why am I putting myself through this hardship? And I eventually quit on that day because I was thinking of the good life and what the life is outside of it. And I hadn't really thought of that before. But when I was in that race, I understood like when you think of good things and you have those happy moments, they don't last for 5 days. Like they don't, and they're not going to. So there's no point of even thinking about them. They don't exist. What exists is that you're in the scenario and there's nothing else you can do about it.
Yeah. So it becomes almost, if you look at the end, or if you look at the positive or the bright side of this equation that you're in, like, oh, I can just get this, I will be happy I got a buckle or something stupid. In that regard, you see it almost like a goal killer. And so it traces back to where you had this goal to become a SEAL and you ended up quitting and stuff. And so because of that movement towards the positive, if you will, you kind of responded that if you're in a tough situation, you're not going to give you're not going to give yourself that luxury.
Exactly. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
The fugazi, wishy-washy. Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's good too, because that's where, I mean, a lot of, I would say fun, but that's like a lot of that post-race blues comes from after you get the buckle and everything. And it's the happiness. That's your happiness. But like you said, it lasts for like 5 minutes and then 10 minutes. And then you go get a shower and you're like, I'm sore as hell. But the experience that you had and the fun and the adventure that you had was those 4 days, 5 days of just gritting it out and having a blast on the trail. That's where all the memories come from, not from getting that buckle at the end, that with a 30-second endorphin rush when you come across the finish line, and then it's all gone. And you're just sitting there with a buckle after 250 miles, just like, okay, now what?
Exactly.
So for the Bigfoot 200 in 2023, I normally would ask, like, what are your lows? But instead, because you disassociate, like you just described, do you have a high? Do you have a huge memory from that experience of like, I loved this moment?
Moments that I loved in the race. The sunset on the first day, going through like the end of the blast zone, and it's like nice day out. It's really fun. I also was coming from Florida. So like it was awesome weather out. Like I was like, this is crisp and clean and cool. So I enjoyed that. And then I had an involuntary, like, bawled my eyes out when I got to Pompey Peak, because I, again, had no idea what was going on. I just didn't care. And the photographer, I forgot what her name was like, oh, you're done with all your climbing. And I'm like, what? She's like, you're done with your climbing. I was like, what do you mean? She's like, that's it. Because I looked at my watch, I had 38,000 feet. So I'm expecting like another like 4 or 5, 6,000 feet to go. Yeah. I like bawled my eyes out. I cried like a little girl. Yeah.
But that's real. Okay. So that does mean you are still connected to yourself. Like you're not kind of like in your own space where you're just gone. There is a moment where you are connecting certain next things that are coming and everything. And to emotionally respond to something that you just heard is huge. It is like you're putting yourself back in the reality of the event itself. So you're not completely disassociating, because I don't want people to mishear this. I don't want people to think, oh, he's just a machine that he doesn't like, he's not empathetic. He doesn't care about anything at all. Like you do recognize the experience that you're having, and there are positives that do occur. And I think that's good for me, honestly, to kind of get a clear picture of what it looked like for you. Now, we were just starting to go into Moab 240 at the exact same time, which you ran in 2022, that you did DNF. And in that experience in 2022 for Moab, you said that you were not prepared. And I think you, like I said, you posted just yesterday that if you fail to prepare, prepare to fail.
Correct.
Right. What's the difference in your preparation between Moab 240 and Bigfoot 200? Because you were in Florida.
So preface for Moab 240. At this point, every ultra that I'd ever ran, I'd ran off a couch. So I had done like 650Ks, a couple 50 milers, and a couple 100Ks, like off the couch. And I signed up for Moab, and I had gone on these deployments, and like I just didn't have the time. So I think my longest run before Moab was like 10 miles, and it was like 2 weeks before the race. So I literally went in with no training at all. I wore all black clothing, like t-shirt and shorts, like a black hat. No nutrition training. So I wound up like buying a whole bunch of goos, never tried those before. And the scratch bars, the raspberry bars, I don't know if you ever had one of those before. They're about as dry as the area is over there. And I had brought no electrolytes. I just had the water. So unfortunately, if you've never ran some of Destination Trails races, sometimes they wind up being understocked. So there was no electrolytes for Rob. So yeah, it was a rough race. I got like 72 miles in and dropped.
I'm laughing.
Sorry, what was the question?
I'm just laughing about how bad it went for you.
Yeah, that's
Horrible.
pretty. That is no prep. You were on basically, you were tapered. You were tapering the whole time.
Yeah, the whole time. And I was like pretty overweight at that point. I was like 210. And I like blacked out in the middle of the mountains. I was like, oh, like when's the next aid station? Like 28 miles. I'm like, what?
Oh.
There's like, oh, there's a water spot like 4 miles.
Water
I'm like, yeah, guess what? The water was empty too.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
I will reserve my comment. I've done one of their race. I did the Zion 100K, and their water stop was being replenished, fortunately, by the time I got there.
It's good.
I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
It's a little dry.
Yeah, it was dry. Everything is dry. everything was dry. I was pretty dehydrated, and I dropped that race too. It's a great day. So we touched on obviously the Bigfoot 200. We touched very briefly on Moab 240. More recently, though, your experience at the Antarctica was not dry. Well, it was dry, but it was not nearly as warm as it was probably in the desert. But so Antarctica 100, that's not something a lot of people have on their resume.
It is not.
No.
That was an idea I populated after TransCon. I wanted to do the coldest 100-miler and hottest 100-miler in the world in 1 week. But turns out you can't go to Antarctica in the wintertime over there, because it would essentially be the same week as Badwater 135.
Mm-hmm.
So the only option was for us to go during the traveling time, essentially.
So the rationale was because you wanted to do the coldest 100s you could do?
Yeah. I hate the cold. It's my least favorite thing in the world. I hate cold so much.
I was like, I could give you other races that aren't there, but that's beside the point. What were you going to say, Steve?
I was going to say, well, I think you went to the wrong place for that if you hate the cold.
Oh, yeah. It was cold. It was dry. I couldn't see anything without goggles on.
So
it's not the most fun.
This isn't an ultra sign-up race. No. So how did this race?
Yeah, how did you get that done?
How did this come to be an actual event for at least you and Paul and stuff? Like how did it become an event? Because I don't see it on ultra sign-up. It's not something people sign up for.
We got lucky.
Right.
Essentially, I gave Paul the idea, and then miraculously, about 2 or 3 days later, someone from Runbuck, which is the company that hosts the race, reached out to Paul. His name is Joe. Joe is the man. Missy Joe. But he reached out and said, hey, like if you want to run Antarctica, we have a marathon and 100K, and there's a 24-hour time limit. So Paul just asked, hey, can we just run for 24 hours straight? Can we just do that instead and try to get 100 miles? And they said, sure. So that's how that came to be. They gave us a pretty big discount, and with the sponsorships, it wound up becoming net neutral, which is very nice.
Yeah.
That's very nice.
It was a complete blessing. That was one of the more insane races I've had outside of my Navy, or most insane experiences I've had outside of my Navy years.
I would say so. Like just getting there in itself is an event. Like that's like when you're there, you're like, oh, this is cool now. Like I can go run. But like just getting there is because the logistics getting there and then all the clearance that you need to even get there is harder than the race, I would assume.
It definitely, getting there, we flew to Cape Town, South Africa, and then from Cape Town it was a 5.5-hour trip, like directly south. to Antarctica. It was a Russian research base. And because of the treaty that Antarctica has, that there's no military presence in Antarctica allowed, at least until 2044, I believe is the year. There was no issue with our clearances. So like I have a clearance and Paul has a clearance. So we would immediately be flagged if that wasn't the case. Like if we tried to run in Russia, we'd lose our job essentially. So we were blessed in that regard as well.
So give me the details. So you had 24 hours to do as many miles as you possibly could. The goal was to hit 100. What was your actual time?
23, 22, 57, 23, 20, 57, something like that.
And so
it was very slow. It was like realistically, my training block beforehand for that was pretty rough. I had a stress fracture in my ankle that I kind of just like put off. And I got about 3 weeks of training for it.
Yeah.
I did like a 40, a 70, and then a 70.
Yeah, no pause. You got to pause. Sub 24 for a 100-mile race is pretty desirable by a lot of people. Like I recognize it was slow in your world maybe, but for a sub 24, that's a good time for a 100-mile for a lot of people. And you were in Antarctica.
Yeah, it was definitely, it wasn't necessarily easy. There was also a little mini hill in there. It was deceiving. It was like a mile long and it would go about like 200 feet. So like we wound up doing like a little under 7,000 for the 100.
Yeah.
Which like, I trained for nothing because they told me it was going to be flat. And then I saw this little hill. I was like, this is going to suck. And there was also like 40, 50 mile an hour winds going up the hill, which let me tell you, that hill sucked. And it was ever so slight. It was like this.
So was it a loop? Was it a out and back?
What was the mile loop?
So originally it was supposed to be a 16-mile loop. Thank goodness that didn't happen. And then it was supposed to be a 10K loop, but then they said the weather was too rough. So then they made it a 2.5-mile loop. It was a 4.2 kilometer loop. I think that's the right math. 4.2 kilometer loop, essentially going around the base, then a little bit out and then back. So it was pretty repetitive. We did 38 laps plus a little bit at the end to clock in the final miles. The course essentially went, you left the start line, you did a little climb, probably about 30, 40 feet. You looped around the base, then you ran down about 100, 150 feet over the next like mile and a half. And then you turned around, then you went up to the start line again. That was like about a little less than a mile. You just did that. And then as soon as you turned to go back up that hill, every single time there was a little building that you would pass. And it would just be like 45 mile an hour gusts of freezing wind, like directly in your face. Like my balaclava, like I had a little neck warmer. You put it on your face when you left the aid station, within about 6 seconds, it'd be like frozen solid. And it would start to slide down your nose and you couldn't really push it back up. And you'd breathe on it, try and melt it a little bit, and it would melt, and then it would just like freeze immediately. Yeah, it sucked.
Yeah, and what was it like? So, what did you have to have like bigger shoes? Because I saw you had like 3 or 4 pairs of socks on, and then so you're running with bigger shoes, and then you're probably weighing more because you have more gear on, right?
So for the shoes, I put a post on Instagram of me taking my shoes off, and I have every shoe fanatic and an expert in the world telling me what I should or shouldn't have done. But personally, for me, I have very poor circulation. That includes my fingers, my hands, and my feet. So I know that same thing if people aren't aware of how gloves work. Most gloves insulate the warmth that is in there. Mm-hmm. If your hands wind up getting cold, when you put gloves on, it's not really going to do too much. It'll take a lot longer for your hands to heat back up because it's supposed to insulate the heat. If it's already cold, it's not going to do anything. So with my feet, there was no return if those got cold. Like that would be it. So I usually wear a size 14 shoe. I threw on a size 15 shoe. And thank goodness Topo, I communicate with them frequently. They were able to make one in stock for me. And then I threw on 3 pairs of merino wool socks. I was more than adequate. Maybe I could have gotten away with 2, but I wasn't going to risk. Like I never took off my socks. I never touched my feet. I never did anything with my feet. There was no way I was taking off my shoes.
Yeah.
I'm impressed. So your feet did not get cold.
No, feet never got cold. Extremities wise, my hands One time in the aid station, I left my gloves on by accident. My hands sweated through, and then my fingers got frozen shut inside my inner layer. So I had like a mitten over an inner layer, and that inner layer completely froze. And essentially my hands were stuck like this, started getting frostbite because I was still 2 miles away from the aid station. So that was not fun. And then gear wise, I wore a pack in the beginning with a water bottle with liquid nutrition in it. But towards the end of the day, like getting into the night, it got too cold. And even with, I had 1,000 milligrams, I had 1 gram of salt essentially per bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Like even with that amount of salt, it wasn't able to stay in liquid form. Even like with all the shaking and all the movement, it would still freeze. And so I took the pack off, it was useless.
That's a lot that you have to kind of keep in mind of that's freezing as you're moving. Like it's something you have to take into account. Again, sub 24 is quite a respectable time, even though you may not feel like it is with all the logistical side of things that you're trying to go through. Now, I do have one question I am curious about. You've got the world record, but it's really tied.
Correct.
So why didn't you out sprint him at the end?
Well, really, the reason why we ran together, I dislike running with people for long periods of time. I'm not a fan of it. So Paul was having sleep deprivation issues, like about 20 something miles in, and like needed a pacer, and like no one was going to pace him. So he had like, he's like, you got to run together. So that was the way that we did it. I probably could have ran faster, but Paul and I have very different running philosophies. Paul will run continuously for 24 hours. And like whenever he starts to go slower, he'll just go slower. I'll do the run walk where like I'm able to clock in like a 10-minute mile moving, and then I'll go walk, a quarter mile or 0.2 of a mile. So my plan went out the window because Paul wanted to run the whole time. So like I was dead by like mile 70. I wanted nothing more than my legs to fall off and to not be there anymore. So there was no sprinting at the end for me. I was done. My knees still messed up. I had a like fully like my ankle still messed up, like stress fracture wise. Yeah, it was pretty rough.
Yeah, you should have still out sprinted him.
You know, the worst part is like the end is like this uphill that goes to the start line. And there had been a tailwind up that hill going to the start line the entire race. You essentially turn to go up the beginning of the hill, you have a headwind, and you turn again, and you have a tailwind. And at the last hill, all the wind stopped. No wind at all. So like we were trying to run up the hill, like we literally couldn't do it. It was like we were like going like a 14-minute mile up the hill.
Yeah. Did anybody else do the 24-hour?
No, there was one gentleman from China that did the 100K. He cooked. He did like a 10-hour 100K.
That's crazy.
He flew. That guy, dude, he lapped me like 7 times.
Well, that's amazing.
I'm very thankful that he didn't run for 24 hours. Because he would have smoked our record.
Could you imagine?
That would have been horrible. He flew. I think he's currently right now doing the 777. So he's doing the 7 marathon, 7 continents, 7 days.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Antarctica, Steve, that you may have?
The only thing I had, because you didn't, you don't like the cold and everything, was that one of your mental prep, like going into it? You're like, I hate the cold. It's a challenge for me, so I want to do it. Did you do anything to mentally prep for that? Different than you would any other race?
Not different than I would do any other race, but something that I learned from my time in the military, specifically there was a test that I had to do in BUDS where you go underwater and you tie knots along a string. So essentially you swim to the bottom of the pool, you have to tie a knot, say, instructor, I did it okay. They look it, then you untie it and you tie another knot, and you have to tie 5 knots in one breath. Really sucks, right?
Yeah.
And there's no real way to train for that. So usually everyone's first time when they start practicing it, everyone always fails. And we had an instructor teach us a way to be able to learn how to do it on the surface. So that's how I do my races now. And the way that you do it is that you completely visualize what your scenario is going to be before you're there. So that means every single minute detail that comes from all of your 5 senses. So you know that you're going to be in Antarctica. There's going to be wind on your face. It's going to be very cold. It actually might burn because of how cold it is. You're going to be hearing the crunching of soft ice snow underneath your feet, and you're going to be feeling pain in your knees that you're like swelling more than they've ever swollen before. And your ankle is going to feel like it's breaking in half. Your stomach's going to be super upset with you, and you know that it's going to be upset with you. And you visualize all the way to the very minute details the feeling of your watch vibrating on your wrist and having that sound when you hit the next mile, and what do you think when you hit the next mile, and how are you going to go into the aid station, when you're going to fuel, and how are you going to eat it, and when are you going to prep it, all of these different things you visualize over and over and over and over again, so that when you get in a scenario that is very high risk, very high pressure, or it's going to be very difficult, you've already experienced that so many times beforehand that you're able to operate as if you've done it in the past. So that's what I do for all of my races. And that's what I did for that one. I just, when I would go on training runs in Salt Lake City, I would literally visualize that I'm in the middle of nowhere and this straight thing is just all ice and I'm frozen and I can't walk.
I think that's incredible, and it's incredibly helpful. Like I try to convey that to my athletes and my runners, to visualize that, and not only visualize, like, because most people think of like visualization exercises, they think of like, let's visualize, I can't think of the word of it. But like, look at all the positives. But you brought up a good point, is you got to visualize the lows too. You got to visualize all the bad thing that's going to happen, so that when they do happen, your body already feels like it's gone through it before.
Correct. And that's another thing that also, for people that have ran more than one ultra or 100 miler, the more you do it, the more you have been there in the past, and the easier it does become. Like the first 50K I ran, I thought I was never going to run an ultra again. It just becomes easier the more that you do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like the idea that you're talking about with visualization and everything. And Steve, I agree. I think a lot of people are going to look at visualizing what's the start look like, what's the finish look like. But I don't know if they go to the level of specificity of what, and visualization is eyes, right? We tend to think of eyes, but you actually said hearing the sound of the crunching of the snow and all that. Like that's taking another part of your senses into the equation and everything, that you're trying to have the full Monty, if you will, of that experience, right? Of everything kind of being sensed around you, not just simply, here's what it's going to look like, here's what could happen when this kind of takes place, and thinking it through, but trying to put yourself in an experiential type standpoint. I think it's really cool. But it makes me want to ask you this question. Do you think it is more fun to be a crew chief and support somebody, or do you think it is to participate in the event? Which do you prefer?
Which do I prefer?
And you have to pick.
I would prefer to run it only for the reason that I'm going to learn more as a runner in in a rough situation than I will as a crew member. A crew member, yes, you'll learn things and people management, and like you're going to learn a lot of external positives. You're going to learn about external lessons if you're a crew member. When you are a runner, you are learning a lot of internal lessons, things that are about yourself and the things around you and how you react. So I would say running, just because mainly I'm able to learn more from a personal perspective.
But I also think it adds, I think it adds to your ability to be a better crew chief or a better crew member. I think it adds, just why when you look at races, regardless of the distance, those volunteers at aid stations that are your best volunteers. I used to be a race director as well, but even for the races I participate in, the best volunteers are those who have been ultra runners or have that experience, because they kind of know when that person's walking in either with the death march or they're looking like they're on fire because they're running really quickly. Like they know how to respond to the emotions, the positives and negatives that particular person's coming through, because they've seen it, they've experienced it, and they've been a part of it. And it doesn't mean you have to have run an ultra to be a good crew member or to be a good aid station volunteer, but I think you have an advantage when you've experienced some of that event or that type of event that the runners have. So I think that's a really good point. And it's good to hear that you prefer to be a runner as well, because I think that's what we all enjoy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So upcoming, you have the Cocodona 250.
Correct.
We're going back to
one of my favorite races.
Yeah, we're going back to the desert. Your favorite place to be?
Looking forward to it, or what?
Right.
Well, we're going to see how that's going to go. Right now, I'm signed up for Cocodona 250. However, if I get into Badwater 135, I probably won't run Cocodona. Reason being is that there's probably another event that I'm going to be doing in May that's going to be a lot bigger in regards to just overall There'll be a larger event.
Hmm.
So that's still in the works. But also, you might like Cocodona 250. I'm sorry, Steve. I hate the desert. I hate rock races. I hate things that's like everything's like there's no trail. It's just like all rock. Like
Yeah.
I don't want that. And the only reason why I signed up for it is my roommate said that if you sign up for it, I'll sign up for it. Guess who's not running the race? And that guy. So I didn't want to. It was like I never wanted to run it. I only signed up for it so that he would run it. Now he's not running it. So we're gonna see. I really hope I get into Badwater. The idea was to do the coldest 100-miler and the hottest 100-miler in the world. So hopefully that on my application will help.
Yeah, fingers crossed for that then. Although I do kind of want to see you do Cocodona 250 though. So
I mean, I'll regardless if I do it or not, I'll see you there. But
I'm not at the next one, man.
You're not gonna be there?
I didn't decide. I'm not even on the wait list. I was like, we're driving on the way home.
Do you want a spot?
Oh man, don't tempt me like that. I do. Don't tempt me like that.
I will give you a discount. I'll give it to you cheaper.
I may have to take you up on that. Hopefully my wife doesn't listen to this one. I may have to do it.
If I get into Badwater, you're the first person I'm sending a message to.
All right. Well, keep me on the message list because I'll train like I'm going to do it. That's for sure.
Okay.
I'm friends with Chris.
The director
of Badwater.
Yeah. It's pretty sweet. I've wanted to run that thing forever.
He's a good guy. He's a good guy. He's actually been to my house, which is just insane for me to believe that Chris Kosman's been to my house. Like, it's just mind-boggling to me. But I volunteered for him for a few years, and I've run his race a couple times. Not Badwater 135. I live in Eastern North Carolina. He has a race called the Badwater Cape Fear, and so I've done that. I've a few times volunteer out there as well. He's a great guy. I have zero ability to get you in. I said I know him. That's all I got.
So anybody should be like, knows everyone that's a part of the race.
Yeah. You should definitely. I love Chris. He's a really good guy. He makes some people crazy, but hey, everybody's got a personality, right? So let's talk about either Cocodona 250 or Badwater 135. We won't ask you about your May event, even though those who are listening are probably saying, Jeff, I cannot believe you guys didn't ask him what he's doing in May. I'm assuming you can't tell me.
I can speak it into existence if you want. It's gonna be pretty difficult to do.
It's up to you if you want to share.
Yeah.
All right. Here's the idea. Paul, I'm sorry that I'm releasing this information early. Hopefully it doesn't go too far.
Pause. Should you?
Probably not.
Then you shouldn't. So for everybody listening, I just stopped it. I put it over. It's not gonna happen because I know it's
off the record.
Yeah, off the record. But right now we're recording.
Yeah.
So, and I don't want to go back and edit unnecessarily because
I hate editing.
But I would rather just keep what we just had, this dialogue about the fact I asked you and then I stopped you because people are going to ask me why it's not there. But anyway, so let's assume Cocodona 250 or Badwater 135. Let's assume that you get into Badwater 135.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do to prepare for it? Because if you haven't started now, right?
No, I have not started now. I am so out of shape. It's insane right now. Well, right now I'm currently rebuilding my arch in my foot. I've always been flat-footed. Like I have no business running. I have a size 14 flat foot. That's literally a recipe for problems for the rest of your life in regards to knee pain, ankle pain, and hip pain. So I'm rebuilding my arch, as well as just doing basic strength training, nothing too crazy in the gym. I'm going to be doing that most likely until the end of January. And then from there, I'll be able to start actually running again. I'll probably be doing some skimo in between now and February. But until then, that's pretty much my game plan. We'll see how I feel in February. I do believe with my given past on having short amount of time to train for races, I think that 4.5 months is pretty adequate. I'd be very happy with like a sub 36 hour. I heard that's a pretty decent time.
It's a good time out there.
That also, I need to start getting some crew members. I have a few people in mind that I told them, hey, if I ever get in this race, will you crew me? And they're from Scotland. So I'm gonna have some Scottish people screaming at me from a van.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah,
let me know if you need a crew for there. I'm right by me. So,
yeah, it isn't it? It's probably like a 2-3 hour drive from you.
Yeah,
that's nice.
Yeah, we're gonna point out the obvious. Why in the world is Matt or Paul not going to be your crew?
Paul does want to be a crew for me. Matt, I don't think wants to crew ever. Probably not. Matt's a good dude. I'm happy that we got him across Texas.
There you go. Let's just leave it at that then. So Paul, though, but he would be your crew?
But I think Paul will be a part of my crew.
Awesome.
I've got the 2 Scottish dudes that'll be coming out for fun. Steve now. And
I mean, I'm already heat trained, so.
Yeah, you are.
That's fantastic. And, you could also do the Cocodona 250 as a training run.
I really am not kidding. I love Aravaipa's races. I think that's so well ran. It's phenomenal. Like top tier 200 miler. That's where you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
I still hate the race. I've crewed it 2 times now. I just crewed it for Mike this past year, Mike McKnight.
Yep.
And I know exactly what's coming. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you?
I don't know how. Like,
are you? Are you working with a coach now?
I'm currently working with. Well, actually, I stopped coaching probably until the beginning of February. I've been working with Mike McKnight for the duration of the time. I did have an idea for another race that I might do in 2026. That's the only reason why I would switch out of using coaching with Mike, just because it would make sense. That race. Have you guys ever heard of Transcendence?
I have not.
Yeah. Isn't that that's the one in New York, right?
Yeah. So in Queens, New York, there's a 1 mile or 1.1 mile block.
Yes, I have heard of this.
So my game plan would be to like rent out an Airbnb like right across the street from the place, and then have I would probably try see. I don't know if Zach Better's accepting coaching, but like someone who's like a very fast, very efficient, flat 100-mile coach would probably be my idea for that. Do like a year's worth of training. But
that's amazing.
I don't know if I want to do
that. How does that sound more desirable than doing like Cocodona? Like that's just insane.
Well, the idea would be super cool of like me being able to get like good sponsors that want to do a lot of research into the science part of it. In regards to filming, it's super easy because it's around 1 block. Like the whole logistics planning, I can go run across the distance of the entire country with very little logistical planning. I don't know, pretty cool. But then again, also you need the sponsors. Like I'm starting a business right now. I'm going to have like that all set up to be automated, or at least to me to be able to run the company on phone calls.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of
running 3,000 miles on a 1 mile, 1.5 mile block.
Yeah. 18 hours today.
No big deal.
You have a message that you told us about that voluntary hardship makes involuntary hardship in life easier. What do you mean by it?
So that came about through it started through when I was going through selection processes in the Navy. So I went through SEAL training, didn't make it through. Then I went to dive school and became a diver. And then through those selection processes, like your life sucks. You're getting the shit beat out of you every single day. Like everything's horrible. You're in student status, which means that you're pretty much like a semi-human, like you have no rights. It's horrible. And I finished and like I got placed onto a team and I got given all this cool gear and like life is good. I don't have to do anything hard anymore. And I realized that it felt like I was like on a high horse. I felt like everything was just easy. So I just decided to sign up for a race with no training. It was a 50K. And the schedule was I got off the submarine on June 24th. The race was on June 29th. And my 21st birthday was June 28th. So I had no training, had just got off a submarine. So literally no running or like literally like no jogging anywhere. And ran this race, like 21st birthday, like started the race shit faced, like was hungover as hell by like mile 20, like hated everything, but it was like a good kick in the nuts. Like I was like, okay, like humble yourself, kid. Like there's a lot like that you need to learn in life. So I made that a consistent thing. I wound up running 50 milers, 100Ks, tried to go up 240 without any training. And I realized the more I ran these races, the more I learned about myself, as everyone does during ultras, and that everything else in life is a lot easier when you are able to put yourself through really hard scenarios. So for me to run up a mountain at mile 130 is a lot harder than me to make 150 cold calls to go get
Oh,
my business startup going. Doing all of these hard and uncomfortable scenarios, when a family member dies, it's not like, oh, this is the first hard thing that I've experienced in a while, or, oh, like my dog died, or I lost my job, or all these things that happen in life that you have no control over. You're going to have a lot better sustenance and brain power to be able to understand how to navigate such a scenario with the amount of stress you've already put on yourself from
Yeah.
how do I handle bad times. That's just what I tell everyone.
I think it's great because I always talk to my wife and tell her like that's kind of the reason I do the things I do too, is because nobody can put me through the situations any harder than I've already put myself through. And I just love having that. And not over people, over the external people, but I just love having that as part of my quiver, I guess, in terms of like mentality.
Well, I don't know about that. But I mean, seriously, this is, to me, I've really enjoyed kind of getting to know you, Rob. And we're starting closer to wrapping up, but just to kind of hear you as a person and what kind of drives you, it's your background in the Navy and your experience there, I think really has shaped you to the person you are today in a lot of different areas. You see it showing up as a crew chief. You see it showing up in how you experience your own running events and everything. And so I think, if you've learned so much about yourself over the past few years that I think has shaped you to the person you are today. And again, we talked about beforehand, I just respect you so much on how you present yourself, even through social media. You're just an authentic human being. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk about it. Before we wrap up, though, I do want to tell you that we do a segment we call Coach's Corner at the end of all of our segments, at the end of all of our shows. And it's an opportunity for us to respond to a listener's question that they submit to us. We also, as coaches, answer, but we invite our guests to answer that question as well. And the irony upon ironies is the question that we got this week really is applicable for someone like you because, and I'll go ahead and read it real quick. It comes through Instagram. It came through Insta Lee Ryan, also known as Lee Ryan. And her question was, any tips for keeping motivation in the winter? I laughed because you have this message of voluntary hardship and you have this message of running in Antarctica. So we think you're going to be especially gifted to answer the question. But before we let you answer, we will at least go ahead and answer first. So Steve, do you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, again, I think I've come back to it over time again. When motivation is lacking, that's when like discipline comes in. Do the little things like get your stuff ready before you even go out the door. Like have your stuff ready the night before so that it kind of like is sitting there mocking you. And to Rob's point, put your gloves on before you go out the door so your hands don't get cold. But that's where discipline kind of takes over, and take those small steps just to make sure that it makes it that much easier to not negotiate a day off with yourself. If you have your stuff already ready to go, you're going to wake up and you're that much less likely to not to go out the door, however you want to put that.
And mine's a little less sensitive.
I'm very eloquent.
That's okay. Yours was eloquent. Mine's a little less sensitive. So for me, it's one of those things is that ultras are hard. Like the events themselves are hard. And even if you sign up for an ultra that's warm, then at nighttime it's generally cold. And so at some point you're going to probably cold in an ultra anyway. So to me, winter running is all prep for what that experience feels like. It helps me learn the type of gear I need to use to stay warm. It helps me understand that if the temperature is 40 degrees, here's what I can wear. If it's 20 degrees, here's what I should wear. And understanding kind of what to wear in winter type running, it helps me on those races that have a cold night or a cold day. And so for me, the motivation is it's an opportunity. Like you just go do it because you get to learn so much more about what you need to do to prepare yourself. And so that's kind of how I encourage my athletes to kind of focus on those types of things. Like you don't get to dictate the weather. Your race is on a day and you're going to experience it.
Mm-hmm.
So, Rob, what about you?
One that you were saying, it's a good opportunity to prepare your gear so you're well prepared. Realistically, if you just have warm gear, it makes life a lot easier than going out with gloves that like aren't good enough or a jacket that's not good enough. You could always take layers off, but you can't put more layers on. And then also like set yourself up for success. Like boil some water, put it inside your water flasks, like put that underneath your jacket, like make yourself warm, have your water be warm. There's so many ways to make it a little bit more pleasant. And That's what I would say. Just, I don't know, like give yourself like a hot pocket as a snack. I don't know, like anything that's warm and happy, like make sure that's in your pack if you're going out for a long trail
I
run.
have never,
That's a good idea.
yeah, I've never thought about putting hot water in my water bottle.
Oh, that's a game changer. Hot water and honey and a little bit of honey with like your electrolytes in your bottle is a game changer.
I've
Convenient.
never thought of that because I always think in terms of, oh, you want to be cool and refreshed and everything, but I also don't drink nearly as much when I'm running cold. But
Yeah.
that's a really good idea. Okay. Well, cool. Well, that is our coach's corner. And so Rob, thank you
Yeah.
for helping us out with that. And Insta-Lee Ryan or Lee Ryan, thank you for submitting the questions. If you are listening and you have a question for us to answer and you want our guests to kind of give their 2 cents as well, please make sure to send it to us. We'd love to kind of read it on the show and get that answer for you. Hopefully it'll be helpful. Sometimes they're not, but helpful. Questions are good, but sometimes our answers are a little all over the board, but we do appreciate you taking the time to send them in. So again, if you're interested, send it in and we will do our best to respond. Rob, thank you for joining
really
us.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you for
This has
having
been-
me. Y'all are
It's a
fantastic.
great conversation. We appreciate you joining us and appreciate that. So if you could just stick around as I end the recording, but for everybody listening, thank you for taking the time to download the episode and check us out. Make sure to tell your friends, you know, the usual stuff we tell you, like everybody tells you, make sure you like, subscribe and all that kind of stuff. We would love for you to do that. But if you don't, because you hate us, that's okay too. Just let us know what you don't like about it and we will change it. Probably
Maybe.
not. But anyway, thank you so much. And again, Rob, stick around and we'll talk to everybody else later. See you guys.
Thank you.